Thank you for joining us with another Mold Talks Heroes. I am here with Sandi and David, who are very special guests. They're here to share their story so that we can end this suffering, because obviously a lot of people, as you will hear soon, suffer unnecessarily through having mold inside of their environments that creates this environment for, not optimal health. And without further ado, Sandi and David, hello. Thank you for taking the time here to share your story. I apologize in advance, as I know that sometimes this is going to bring up a lot of trauma, reliving these things. And I just so greatly appreciate you, doing this and putting that aside to help others and get the word out.
Sure. Thank you for having us,
Thank you, Michael. Yep.
letting us tell our story.
Yep.
So the first question that I have is, the first thing that takes place is we start not feeling well. We start feeling different. We probably go through doctors trying to figure out what's going on. And that creates the start of this journey. And I guess what I want to know from you guys is, what sort of journey did you have to go through to finally figure out that there was something going on in your home that was causing this?
Okay, well, it started, I guess, back in 2017. I was washing dishes quite often, noticed that my tongue would go numb. I've never been allergic to anything, and just noticed it constantly was happening, and I think my fingers would go numb as well. At that time, our son was having a lot of anger, a lot of issues. We went to a lot of doctors to find out what was the problem, I guess, with him, what was, irritating his, he was very upset at every little thing, very trouble at school, behavioral issues. We saw, your memory kind of goes after a while, because you've seen so many doctors. We had doctors say it was, at one point he had bipolar, I think. He had all these diagnoses that something just wasn't right. And I think that was around the time I say the main symptoms. There was an incident at school where he could not speak. He wasn't able to talk. And this is what led us to finding the right doctor. He couldn't speak at school. I got a call that he sounded like he'd had a stroke. So I get up to the school and he can't talk. I mean, he's talking like he's had a stroke. We had MRIs, we had EEGs, blood tests, labs. We saw psychologists. We did all EMDR. We did everything. Finally, we did find a wonderful neurologist who asked about his environment. And I think she's our very first angel in this. And she did some lab work that showed the markers for mold. So we were kind of like, we knew that I was having some symptoms at the time. Did you look under the sink at that time? Was that?
Yeah. So, Michael, thanks for the opportunity to tell our story. It's we've told it dozens and dozens of times, but there's been so many twists and turns and emotional aspects of it that telling it, we jump around and apologize for that. But yeah, so I'm an engineer, project management by trade, and so I wasn't spending a lot of time in the house as much as Sandi and the kids, and so Sandi started telling me, like she's mentioned, that when she's in the kitchen, her throat would be thrushed, her ears, would kind of redden up, and her tongue would go numb, and I was like, well, just go see the doctor, and again, this is before we learned anything about mold, and where we've fortunately or unfortunately had to be very educated on mold now. But so I actually I don't know how we got the idea, but someone mentioned doing some air sample tests. So we called in 2017, or I called someone to just do some air samples. And again, not knowing what I know now, they did one sample, they did two samples,
Yeah.
in a 100 square foot home. And of course, nothing out of the ordinary showed up, but, we didn't know where or how, or, we didn't know how to guide these people that were there to do their sample tests where it may be emanating from. So nothing there. And then, Sandy kind of started mentioning, again, or continuing that there was an issue. And we had I wasn't feeling any symptoms. Sandy, again, by this time, I think she'd been diagnosed with lupus by her doctor because of the labs and the symptoms. But it wasn't typical lupus. It's for those that have been through the mold, the medical mold journey. It's very frustrating because most doctors are not educated on what environmental toxins and what they can do, and so they're a lot of them are trained to just kind of slap a diagnosis and start prescribing medication. So Sandy wasn't really getting better. The kids, as they grew, emotional issues we would see, like Sandy mentioned, but children are gonna, as they grow, they're going to go through a lot of developmental and neurological changes. So it's really hard to pin down the exact date, but in 2019, after this continued, I looked under the sink and I found some dripping from the disposal. And when I removed the boarding from under the sink, my tongue actually went numb. And that was kind of an eye-opening experience because, again, I'm not allergic to much. I don't have a lot of the sensitivities that they do. But as soon as I flipped that board up, my tongue went numb and I was staring at a big board of what we now know as Stachybotrys.
Wow.
So,
and to ask you another question, kind of backing up a bit, if you will. When you first heard the word mold, and I would love for you guys to answer each of you on this question. What was your level of skepticism? The first time you hear the word mold and that it could have been an impact to you and your family and the different symptoms you're experiencing. What was the level of skepticism? What were some of the first thoughts going through your head?
Well, I was open to it because, like I mentioned earlier, our son had that feet went, and I just researched constantly, and there was some stuff about your indoor environment, and nothing was working. So I just I've got that crazy intuition. Something said it's a possibility. So I was open to it. I definitely didn't think it was crazy. I mean, I'd seen stuff and read stuff, so I was open to it.
Me personally, and again, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm more, I guess, an engineer. I've been brought up and trained to be fact based and probability based, and what have you. So, I remember in the 90s and maybe 20 some odd years ago when a lot of the mold lawsuits first came out. And I remember a lot of I guess backlash or pushing on that, saying it was very a lot of tort reform because of that, because and I think the media kind of painted a picture of not just not this being this huge environmental hazard of more of people looking for a handout. Now we now know that's not obviously true. So, and again, just being trained and being fact based, there's mold everywhere. We live in Houston in the Texas Gulf Coast. There's a lot of humidity. There's going to be mold, or at least this was my thing at the time. There's going to be mold in every house. So I don't want to say I was skeptical, But everything I had learned or known since then, or was aware of, was it, that mold was overblown. The effects and the health hazards were overblown. But like Sandy said, when nothing's working, when you're going to dozens of doctors and you're trying dozens of things, you have to start looking at other options and other possibilities.
And when did your mind start to change from mold is overblown to I think there's something here and I think this is a problem for me?
But it's like I mentioned when I was first physically affected, and I think you know a lot of men or women that that are not working out of their homes, especially pre-COVID, they're going away, and maybe their other partner or spouse are staying home more, whether it's with young kids or not. But if you're not like myself, I wasn't as exposed to what was in that house. So when you're not physically feeling it and you're not personally feeling, experiencing a lot of these symptoms um, and hardships that your spouse and your family are, you feel for them, but it's hard to rationalize that this may be something that affects you. So, to answer your question, it was when I flipped that board up and my tongue went numb. So when I was physically affected first.
Hmm. You hear a lot of these challenges in spousal relationships and familial relationships because, it typically is, statistically speaking, one or two out of four, or even three out of four, but you never really get, it's very rare that all four notice it, notice any difference to not just be subtle, where people chalk it up as a normal course of events. And, you know, obviously it took you for experiencing yourself to kind of come around to that concept. What were some of the conversations like before you experienced it yourself? As an engineer and someone who's very fact based, I work with a lot of engineers, so I know very well, and I also have a similar thought process. What were the conversations like, between each other, between in your own head, just thinking what it could be, until you finally experienced it yourself and realized, all right, there's something here. What were your thought process on what it was that was plaguing your family at the time?
Well, it's again, you have these symptoms and you have these issues, and you go to the subject matter experts, the doctors, the in 2017 when we first hired someone to take some ear samples. You kind of expect, or you put your trust and confidence in these people, and um, you and that's something that I've changed too. Is going through all this is to not, I don't want to say don't trust anyone, but make your own um, assessment and kind of follow your gut. But um, you know, it was for us, or for me, you know, and specifically for her and my son, that we're really seeing a lot of these healthcare specialists. It was, we've just got to find the right doctor. We've got to find the right diagnosis or treatment. It wasn't really, that they didn't know what the real assessment or the real, cause was. It was, we've just got to find the right person to care for us. And and it wasn't, again, I was skeptical because of just, what I'd heard in the media. But I don't know,
Sure.
you want to?
Yeah. Yeah, it was frustrating. Because it's like I knew that I don't know why, but I just knew that had to be it. Because every time we would be at home, we felt horrible. And every time we were away, we felt fine. Or anytime my son or daughter were at like my parents' or someone else's house, they would say, "Oh, they were fine here. Why, I
Hmm.
don't see what the problem is. He's fine here." And you start to get like you start connecting the dots. And I think at that time, we had met the neurologist who mentioned, what about mold? And he had a wonderful behavioral psychologist who said the same thing. And she kept saying,
Wow. That's awesome.
yeah. So that really,
Mhm.
I was like, that's it. That's it. So it was frustrating to try to convince him.
You know,
And I
the
mean,
the if you had to put a number on how many doctors you saw before the neurologist, what would you estimate that would be?
I mean, he's got some other challenges. I think that we now know are at least increased or heightened from the mold exposure. But he's you know my son's been seeing some sort of behavioral therapist or psychiatrist, someone with an actual doctor's degree since he was 7 years old, and he's 15 now. So 8 years, 8 years, and just this year is when we know for sure that it was at least increased or attributable to mold. So for 7 years we were searching for something,
Are we talking
he
20, 30, 40 doctors?
at least $15.
yeah, at least.
At least.
Well, we say doctors, therapists, and psychiatrists, and
lab work and
pediatricians, and but again, it's like pediatricians like us. They would reference or send us to someone a little more specialized in mental health, or pediatric mental health. So like you mentioned at the opening, Michael, it's a lot of these disciplines and occupations that that should know about mold and should treat it more more treat it seriously. They're just there's a lack of knowledge.
And if you went to 15 different doctors, did you basically get 15 different diagnoses? Is that about, was everybody trying to peg down different things, or?
it was all kind of the same. It was so broad. It was one they would typically not know at some point. They just honestly didn't know what to say anymore. So they would say, oh, he needs to go see occupational therapy. He needs to have speech therapy. He needs to have just all kinds of different, they would outsource, go try this, go try gluten-free diet, go try see. So they got to the point where they just didn't know how to help us anymore. So we would go see all these people. Where you have like an auditory processing doctor. I mean, every kind.
Yeah.
And you go through these up and down periods where you're sick of going to the doctor. So you do nothing. You're tired of it. You shut down. Because you don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah.
So really, when we found the neurologist is when things started. That changed everything.
Yeah.
She did a neuroquant MRI on him.
Awesome.
And I actually had an ENT tell me that there was no such thing. There was no such thing as a mold MRI when I had his scans in front of me.
Yep.
That it was just something. It was I don't even remember what he said. He had a cold or something, and I'm like, so we've had they just, and it's frustrating because you're like, I'm holding his MRI here. So yeah, really she changed everything.
No such thing as the new code for, I'm not aware of that. And I think that's really what it comes down to. People, don't take the time to educate themselves. Science and technology is ever changing. We're always getting new information. We're evolving technology to be able to identify new things. I think, as a doctor, as a scientist, you have to always keep up with new developing technology. I mean, there's hundreds of resources on the effects that mold can have on our health, on our mental health. And it's crazy to me that, doctors are not keeping up with that. And obviously some are, right? Like your neurologist, but, 15 doctors to get there, that's a lot of time and money wasted and a lot of suffering in between. I want to shift gears to the house a bit, right? Because obviously you guys started noticing some issues with the house as you started exploring. And you talked about how you had somebody come in and take some air samples. And I want to harp on that aspect for a second. Because there's two things that happen here. There's one, you're hoping it is mold because it'll finally answer a question that has gone unanswered for so long. On the other side of things, you instantly are like, I hope it's not mold though, from a financial perspective. And I would love to hear how that took place for you guys, and it probably was different for each of you. And what you thought when you initially got that air sample, and what went through your mind, and how did that take place?
Like when we got the air sample confirming
Yeah, the results.
the results.
Well, how about the one where you didn't confirm results? The first one that you took that was just the center of the room and, told you nothing.
Because I'm like, now that I know what I know, I'm like, oh, they just barely walk in and test.
Yeah.
It was frustrating. I'm like, no, that can't be it. Like, how do you know? You need to go through the whole house. Like, how can
Yeah.
you?
But we didn't know that.
Yeah, at the time. But I mean, I was kind of just like, how do you test for this by just taking a little, just in a.
Well, and at least I thought, we were going the, I don't say the more professional way, but we thought we were taking the extra step of hiring a professional, to come do this. We weren't going to, your local hardware store and getting some, petri dishes, which, there's obviously some issues with that. But we went, or at least I went to the you know the lengths of finding someone that had been reviewed, highly reviewed, and came off as a professional to come in and hopefully tell me what's wrong with my house, if there's something wrong with my house. And so when we get those results, again, just from my education and background, well, there's nothing there, so it can't be the house, so.
Yeah. Well, it's an honest answer. And it happens to a lot of people, right? They do an air test, they get somebody in there a couple $100 later to tell them there's nothing there. And, usually one person says, this can't be right. And, starts thinking more into that. And usually the other person's like, yeah, there's nothing here. Let's try something else. And obviously that can be very frustrating. And obviously you guys know what you know now. And looking back, that is frustrating, beyond frustrating. But at the time, and people have been where you guys have been too. It's very common actually, to not get the answers that you need, and it creates a division. Was there a division amongst you guys at the time? Did you have different beliefs at that point, or were you able to easily overcome that barrier?
I would, I look back now, and I just looked at an email from that assessment, and Dave wrote, he sent me the assessment, and it said no mold. And it was like, that wasn't good enough for me. And I was a little irritated, honestly, but I was not, it wasn't really a day. It was just like, then what is it? Like,
Yeah.
then what is it? Where do we go now? Where do we go from here? So yeah, you want it to say mold so you can find the problem and fix the problem, right? But here we were again, like just no answers.
So what? From my side, it's all about your own personal experience. I'm not as sensitive, as them, but I a very stressful job, and for me it was like a tick off the box. It was okay. I did what I guess I needed to do, or what my spouse wanted me to do, and so let me move on to what I thought was more important. Of course, she didn't have that same kind of outlook because it was affecting more.
And I understand, and this is a very common, thing that happens, and it's a common problem. When you got those negative results, and you obviously had that intuition that there was still something there, Sandy, how did you get resolution from that? Like, how did you get full circle from that point to finally figuring out the mold? Was it when you guys lifted up that cabinet that you realized, or
Yeah, I was like, obviously I'm like, I don't want him feeling his tongue going numb, but I'm like, told you, and we have a good joking relationship, so we could be like that. But yeah, I was like, there it is, there. I hate that it took that, but I mean, yeah, that was when it was.
Yeah.
It was like,
It's when it got real.
see, like it sucks.
yeah, it sucks that people have to go through pain and experience that pain to, see the potential for different things that can impact our health. But as human beings, that kind of tends to happen more often than not. Once you had that experience, and you kind of realize that this is something here. I'm guessing the first thought that went through your head was like, I hired a professional, and here I am. I'm the one finding it. Is that
Yep.
accurate?
Yep, that it was like, okay, that was our first experience with someone didn't do their job.
What did you guys do from there?
So we went through insurance, correct?
Yeah. And I can't remember exactly what spurred us to really even go to the steps of hiring a what we thought was a licensed assessment company. Because again, there's a lot of products out there that and as we'll get to later, there's a lot of products out there that you can just go to the hardware store and paint over some mold primer or whatever. But I can't remember what spurred us to actually
Oh, I do.
Okay.
Sorry, I do. And sorry, mold gives you brain fog. So sometimes we forget, and then when we remember, it's like, okay, our neurologist, our son's labs, had come back as mold markers, and he had a test that showed he had high levels of mold. So that's what it was. It was the connection at the time. It was like, well, they're showing up on his labs, so there's got to be mold here. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
So we now knowing that we needed to do a full kind of formal assessment, so I contacted our homeowners insurance, and was of course told that based on what we thought, nothing would be covered, but here's a number of a mold assessment company. So we actually got our first assessment reference from our homeowners insurance, which is a very large respected homeowners insurance company. So we called them. They came in, looked at the mold under the sink. They said that they could do the work, gave us a proposal, and again, putting our trust in what we thought were licensed certified professionals, we said, okay. Keep in mind, there was no formal assessment, no protocol, and the same assessment company did the remediation.
Wow.
So that was the first time.
Okay. That was the first time. So there's more times?
Oh yeah. This was the first one. So came in, put up the little, protected the barrier in our kitchen. Didn't tell us we should maybe leave. Did the remediation in the sink, under the sink area for a couple days.
Yeah, and then we built back and thought it was good, and so that was early 2020. So keep in mind we're in the throes of COVID mania and COVID quarantine. So the whole family's home. we're all breathing the same air and loving life, as I'm sure everyone was during that time. And the kids were about to go back to school. Summer was over, and unfortunately, my son had sustained a concussion. He got a bump on the head, and I played football in high school and some in college, so again, unfortunately or unfortunately, I know what concussions look like and the typical protocol, and so he seemed okay, but his moods and his behavior became even more extreme. And so we, by this time, like Sandy mentioned, we met this pediatric neurologist who said we probably need to do something. His symptoms aren't getting any better. So she set up an MRI and had the forethought of ordering, a neuroquant, which, some of you probably know what that is, but some of the people on the podcast may not. But it's basically another test during an MRI where they look at different markers for heavy metals, environmental toxins, and etc. And so when we got those results back, I think it was 6 of the 8 markers that they tested came back positive for mold toxicity. And so this, again, this is 6-7 months after that first remediation. So we hadn't gone anywhere. So the mold had to be in the house. So thus started our second assessment and remediation. And we called the same company that our homeowners insurance had recommended. And they came in, looked at the ducts, looked in our HVAC, said there's mold here. And then gave us a proposal to do all the remediation themselves. And that was the second one.
Okay. And, obviously knowing what I know, I would guess that the combination of on the first time, they didn't identify everything. Plus, it doesn't sound like they used proper engineering controls, probably spread a lot of stuff around, which increased the exposure instead of decreased the exposure. Doesn't sound like the HVAC was even thought of, when that obviously typically gets contaminated when you have mold in your home. So very interesting stuff. And after the second time, all is well, or?
Well, when you're dealing with kind of a brain or a head injury, things aren't, and mold toxicity at the same time, things aren't just going to automatically typically get better, even when you remove mold. So so we we kind of kept trucking on, and my son, we started taking some kind of detox supplements and medications that the neurologist had suggested, but he wasn't getting any better. He, like Sandy mentioned, started having daily tremors, and he was 12 at the time?
Oh, 2020.
So it's 13.
Yeah, he's
12, 13 years old, and he's taking medication that shouldn't he shouldn't have to take. And but we were thinking and hoping that after so much time, everything would heal up, or he would detox, and at the same time, my daughter had started having continual nosebleeds,
stomach
runny
aches,
nose, GI issues, which of course we took her to different experts and specialists, and we're trying everything,
and this started after the second remediation.
Yeah, we started, and I've gone back and looked at some stuff, and it was before. There were some symptoms before. She would sleep with a Kleenex in her nose, just stuffy all the time. We had, carpets removed, constant sinus. She had strep throat constantly, had her tonsils, adenoids removed. She was always sick, and she just kept getting sicker, and her stomach hurt all the time. And they just kept saying, she's just anxious. She just needs to go back to school. she's just anxious. She's just anxious. I mean, I even had a principal say, she just doesn't want to be here. You know, they were just very, but it was, she did not feel good. She didn't, her heart just went out. She was, you know, losing friendships, and she was just going down pretty quick at that point. I think after the second remediation, it just seemed to everything
get worse.
down.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that mean there's a third remediation in this story?
Yep. So that, you know, that was like in the fall of 2020, and then in the summer, early summer of 2021, just last year, we actually, you know, or I actually kind of stumbled upon, you know, what would be the third remediation when that I was changing out some the the cartridge in the shower, and actually tweaked the plumbing to where, you know, I had to call a plumber to come fix the valve. And when they came in to cut a sheet or a window into the sheetrock to get to the valve, as soon as he cut the hole, he went and got me and showed me that the pretty much 3/4 of the wall between our shower and our master bedroom was completely filled with mold up and down the wall, black and green. Yeah, and that's really the second and only time I've had a you know, my tongue go numb and kind of, you know, an immediate response to mold.
Wow.
So it was in there, and so again we call the same assessment company. They come in and they do a much wider assessment. Again, after going through this a few times, you start picking things up. You start asking, kind of directing the assessment company, you know, to do a more thorough job. And after, you know, he did an assessment, he found it in 3 different spots. So now that it was much bigger remediation required, he still didn't write up the protocol. And then he suggested that I call, you know, he gave me 2 or 3 names of remediators. And so we called and signed up a remediation company in the summer or last summer. And we were out of the house for about a month while they went through this remediation. And
So basically, they were cut out to remediate the first 2 times. So the third time, this company who does both assessment and remediation at that point have decided this is above our pay grade.
yeah, or you know, I think, and again, you know, knowing the Texas, you know, regulations, you know, what is it, 25, I think some 20 or 25 square feet, that they're, you know, the assessment company is supposed to write up a protocol and go to another remediation. But so I think this was, they said this is too big for us to do the remediation by ourselves.
Okay. So you got another remediation company in to then do remediation. And this sounds like a larger scope at this point. And how did that process go?
Well, knowing what we know now, they came in, we left, we had a ton of Airbnbs. We've spent more money on rentals than I can even handle saying. They put up the barriers, they laid stuff on the floor, but they didn't move furniture, they didn't cover anything. They just put barriers where they were going to be working. Everything was exposed. We have video camera, and I happened to peek in, and I could see them carrying my daughter's moldy vanity down through the playroom, down the staircase. They didn't bag it. No materials bagged.
There's no procedures written up. There was no requests to approve the remediation chemicals or sprays that they were using. It was, you know, here's a proposal. Here's our price to do it. and we went from there. Unfortunately, and that, we've paid the price for that, because, like Sandy said, they probably spread it. And we know, we know now that they made some of their own assessments. The remediation company made some of their own assessments on their own, that were incorrect. And it what they came off as a professional, remediation company. It Now that we know what the requirements are, they were nowhere near it. And as a matter of fact, as we'll get to later, getting some of the labs that we've gotten back on our children, some very high levels of even non-mold toxins are in there, and it could most likely only come from what was used during the remediation. And we still have not gotten any MSDS sheets or any clarity on what was used during that remediation.
Oh. Well, in terms of full disclosure, I don't know if you guys are aware, but I founded a remediation company, and I've been working in the industry since 2012, and it's what led to the book, The Mold Medic. And passionately, I've been helping the most sensitive individuals to really figure out what is this health thing that keeps coming up, and why do industry professionals not hit the mark in that regard. And to do it right, it typically costs more money. And I think the reason is that most companies don't do it right is because A, they don't understand, and B, they have to work with insurance companies who want to pay as little as possible. So naturally, the whole industry is designed to cut corners instead of do things scientifically. But let me ask you this. Let's just say I cost double. And let's say you had to pay double on the first time to do things the right way. Would that have saved you in the long run for all of what you endured? And, the reason I'm asking this question in the first place is because a lot of people get taken advantage of. And, it's kind of like when you buy insurance in the first place, you try to get the best deal. But sometimes people don't know that the best deal is doing it the right way the first time and not as cheap as possible, because this is kind of the event of how the industry works.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there's again, we're on year, since that first assessment and remediation, which was done by the same people. We're going on almost 3 years now of going through medical issues, going through, dozens of housing situations. I've, I when my son was going through his tremors and post concussion, I had to take some family time off from my job, and that ultimately cost me my job. I was let go, major operator, after 10 years. Never had taken family time or anything. Yeah, it's cost us dearly. Our family's in a constant state of flux. Like we mentioned, our kids have, we're hopeful that that things turn around, but for at least 4 years now, they've lost their child. They have no social. Um,
Yeah,
they have no social friends. They've, it's been very traumatic.
yeah, it's hard to, your kids look at you and they trust you. And when we don't even know what's going to happen, like this last, our rental having mold and we have to move again. It's like, at what point can you say we're going to be okay, we're going to be fine, and then things keep happening. You just
That the extra amount of money that you're talking about, Michael, is pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
From experiences that we've had to go through, both from a financial aspect and from an emotional and wellness aspect. It's we just wish we were more educated when we started this.
Yeah, if we had had somebody say, if this could happen, if you don't, if we knew more at the time, we would have been like, just fix it right.
My heart goes out to you guys. I mean, I have two little kids myself, and I can't even imagine what you guys have been through. And there's nothing that I can say to ever make it better. So I really wanted you to know from the bottom of my heart, it's this is why I'm here, because I hear stories like yours. And it's troubling, and it didn't have to happen, right? Had you had the right professionals involved from day one, had the industry not allowed these professionals to exist in the first place from day one, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in. And this is wide reaching, obviously. And so it's just, there's just no excuse for this. I want to, it's hard to end on a good note when there's so much pain involved, right? And I want to try to switch gears so that we can talk about, some lessons learned, giving people that may be in a similar situation as you, a way of learning through what you've been through so that they don't make the same mistakes. What is the biggest lesson you've learned through this journey that you wish you had known years ago to save you some heartache that other people can learn from?
I would say listen to your gut, listen to that. That's a real thing. Like, it took a lot of convincing of everybody, even friends that thought I was ridiculous. When you just know, especially when it comes to your kids and your family, listen to your gut, and like, it just, advocate for yourself, learn everything you can. And listen to people that it hasn't happened to. If you have someone going through this, like, really listen to them if you know them, because there's family, there's friends that we don't speak with anymore because they, mold's everywhere, and people after a while naturally don't want to hear your mess. So listen to your family and friends and help them, because it is a devastating journey. Um, I don't, I mean, that's my main thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's like I said before, it's everyone's busy, everyone's got their own, things that they've got to focus on, but just try to learn as much as you can about environmental, hazards and toxins, and be open-minded, understand that, that this isn't just a money grab, like I mentioned earlier, of lawsuits. It's, you know, it's very, could be catastrophic. I mean, we're sometimes holding on by a thread. Just a few years ago, I was, at a very highly paying job with a oil operator, and we're struggling sometimes to pay the rent now. That's how quickly this has taken from us. So um, just keep your mind open and try to learn as much as you can about environmental health, and like she said, advocate for yourself. There's so many doctors that we have had to educate, or at least question, and don't be afraid to speak your mind.
Yeah, do your homework, because you can, like, I started working with, Malachi's message. We found some good people. We found some good through this. Really hold on to people that are willing to help you. Like, you'd be surprised who you can find. Such a bad time, but
That's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah, it is a road. And I know you guys are still going through it and you don't have full closure yet and you're still not out of the woods yet. And that's why I'm so appreciative for you to get on here and to share your story, because you're still going through it, and you're still going through it, and you're helping others not go through it too. And that's just so appreciative. Uh, If you had one piece of advice, just one thing, I know you guys already gave a lot of great insight. Um, one piece of advice for somebody else, what would it be?
Someone going through it. Um, I mean, like we just you keep going, like that sounds so cliche, but I don't know. You just don't have a choice but to keep going. And just I tell I'll go with this one. I tell my kids, at least we have each other. Don't It's okay to have your feelings and respect everyone's how they're going through it, but don't hurt your family, you know.
Yeah.
Stay close to your family and talk about it. Talk, talk it out. Have to keep going and you will find where you're supposed to be. I really believe that we will get to where we're supposed to be. But yeah, there's days where we're like, you know, we just want to do something normal, you know. Um,
Yeah, no, it's a good segue of what, I guess one thing that comes to my mind is, um, and again, I, I don't say I was critical but, just being a cynic, um, I, for those, that are going through it and for people who know others that are going through, um, mold exposure environmental hazard exposure, there's not just a physical it's not just a physical affliction. There's a large emotional and mental aspect that people feel and are going through, and just be cognizant that sometimes people's behavior, it's not sometimes it's brought on by not only the mycotoxins themselves, but the whole experience, because it's again, from our children's, emotional, aspect, and then us, it's sometimes hard not to get, I guess, not to blame people, but sometimes that's the mold talking, I guess, is maybe the
Yeah.
best thing to say. Um, it's a very emotional and mental challenge going through what we've had to go
Totally, without a doubt. And I know through talking to so many different people that have been through similar situations, this takes a toll. And it's really a traumatic experience. And we have a lot of trauma that we already have as children growing up into adults. And it compounds, and there's quite a lot of mental stress that gets added to the plate. I want to tell you guys that you guys have my information. Obviously, please do not hesitate to reach out for anything at all. I am more than happy to help in any way that I can. Get you guys through what you're going through currently. And again, I want to thank you so much for putting this out here, and allowing other people to learn from your story, and hopefully people don't have to continue to suffer. And that's why we want to do this, and to show people again that this isn't so rare. This affects everybody, and I really want to thank you guys for doing that. I know it's not easy.
yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, we're in it now. I figure if we have had to go through all this, it's going to be for something. So we're definitely want to help other people. Um,
through.
we've gotten to know it pretty well. So yeah, we help anybody that has any questions. It's just starting to go through this because I wish we had had that,
Mhm.
but
Yeah. When you talk about lessons learned, this is something that, Sandy and I have talked about, giving back and sharing, where we faltered, or where we were, not educated enough, or some of the things that we wish we did differently. And you've given us a wonderful platform to try to do that. So thank you.
yes, thank you very much.
No, the pleasure is all mine, and anything I can do to help, please let me know. And since you guys are willing to connect with others, where can someone connect with you guys?
Um, email, I can give you our email. You can call us, we're really open.
Yep.
We don't sleep much now because we're up constantly settling in somewhere, but no, we are very open. Would love to be a support to anybody.
Yep.
Well,
Any questions?
if you wouldn't mind, please, spell out your email, and I'll make sure we include it in the show notes too, so that people can reach out to you if they need some support or have questions for you.
Yeah, sure. My email is Sandi, SANDI _ Kyle, KYLE at yahoo.com. Yeah, I mean, email,
Yeah.
connect. We would love to. I've met a lot of people online that have questions, and you can't help but want to help everyone that
Yeah.
can help it starting. You want to help. I mean, I'll sometimes stay up till 4 or 5 in the morning answering questions, in these Facebook mold groups. And once you have been in it, you can't help but not want to help, because it's just such a
Yeah.
horrible.
Because you're out on an island,
Yeah.
insurance most of the time won't cover any of these costs, which they have not covered anything of ours yet. And it's uh, you're basically very isolated during this process sometimes. So thank you for having this podcast and your show, and informing people, because you know
Yeah.
it's a growing community, unfortunately, of mold survivors. And for if you've been through it, you hopefully understand the need to give back.
Well, my hope for the future is that this growing community can also start to increase with people who do know, who are taking the steps to be proactive and not becoming the adverse effect of it. And I think that we have a long way to go, but hopefully episodes like this that really open people's eyes to what's happening to us. I mean, our families are getting destroyed, and the financial and emotional hardship is just a lot to bear, and it's avoidable, and that's what kills me the most. So I thank you guys so much for your time today, and really from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate you guys coming on here today. And I hope that everybody listening has really had some eye-opening moments here and can learn from your guys' story, because we want to stop this from happening to great people like yourselves.
Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
again so much.